A billboard ahead displayed my face, older, bruised, and terrified. I noticed it first because it didn't make sense. Billboards on this stretch of highway were usually for things that didn't belong to anyone anymore. Law firms with faded phone numbers, tourist traps that had closed years ago, the occasional smiling politician whose election cycle had long passed. They blended into the landscape, as anonymous as the scrubby trees and cracked asphalt. This one didn't. It stood on the right side of the road, elevated on rusted steel supports, its lights still working despite the emptiness around it. A cold white glow spilled onto the wet pavement, catching the mist that hovered low over the ground. The rain had thinned to a fine drizzle, more suggestion than downpour, but the sky pressed low and heavy, reflecting no stars. I slowed without realizing I was doing it. At first glance, I thought it was an ad for a missing person. The composition fit, close-up portrait, stark lighting, the suggestion of urgency. But there was no text, no phone number, no reward, just a face, enormous against the dark. My face, older, the lines around the eyes deeper, the jaw slack in a way I didn't recognize. One cheek was swollen and mottled with dark bruises. The skin split just below the eye. Dried blood traced a thin, uneven line down to the corner of the mouth. The eyes were what held me, white, bloodshot, fixed on something just beyond the camera, as if whatever terrified them was standing exactly where I was now. The car's tires hissed softly on the wet road as I eased closer. My hands felt numb on the steering wheel, as though the cold had finally reached bone. I told myself it was coincidence. A model who looked like me, a trick of light, fatigue layering familiarity where it didn't belong. But the scar under the left eyebrow was unmistakable. I'd gotten it as a teenager, slipping on ice behind my parents' house. The hairline fracture at the bridge of the nose, barely visible unless you knew to look, was there too. I knew this face because I'd lived in it. The billboard lights flickered once, briefly dimming, then stabilized. The image remained unchanged. Rain streaked across the printed surface, catching in the creases of the older face, making it look like it was sweating. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty, stretching back into darkness. No headlights, no movement, just me and the quiet persistence of forward motion. I drove on. The closer I got, the more details resolved themselves. The texture of the skin, the way the lips were pressed together, trembling slightly, as if the photograph had captured the instant before a plea. The background was indistinct, a blur of gray that could have been concrete or fog or nothing at all. My chest tightened. I became aware of my breathing, too shallow, too fast. Each inhale scraped my throat, cold and damp. I reached for the radio, needing sound, but my fingers hovered over the dial. Something about the silence felt appropriate, like noise would only make this worse. The billboard loomed now, its supports groaning faintly in the wind. I could see where the vinyl had begun to peel at one corner, flapping gently. The motion was subtle, rhythmic, like a slow wave. The eyes on the billboard shifted. It was slight. If I'd been looking anywhere else, I might have missed it. The gaze slid a fraction to the left, tracking the car as it approached. My foot slammed the brake before my mind caught up, the car lurching as it slowed hard. I stopped beneath the billboard, engine idling, the sound suddenly intrusive in the open space. I tilted my head back, rain pattering against the windshield. The face looked down at me. I laughed, a short, breathless sound that immediately died in my throat. "No," I said aloud, testing the word, felt thin. That's not possible." The billboard responded by changing. Not abruptly, not with any digital flicker or dramatic shift. The image aged further, lines deepening, bruises darkening as if hours were passing in seconds. The mouth opened slightly now, teeth visible, the expression no longer just fear but recognition. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. I stared at it, then picked it up with clumsy fingers. No signal. The screen showed a single notification, no sender listed. "You shouldn't stop." My heart pounded so hard it blurred my vision. I typed back, thumbs slipping on the glass. "Is that me?" The reply came instantly. Not yet. The wind picked up, rocking the billboard. The supports creaked, metal complaining under the strain. The older version of my face on the sign flinched at the sound, eyes darting upward, then back down at me. The mouth moved. I couldn't hear anything over the engine, but I knew what it was saying. Go. I slammed the car into drive and accelerated, the tires spinning briefly on the slick pavement before catching. The billboard slid out of view to the right, its light receding until it was just another glow swallowed by darkness. I didn't slow until my lungs burned. Miles passed. The road curved gently through low hills, the scenery monotonous and empty. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see the billboard chasing me somehow, rolling along on its steel legs. Nothing followed. Gradually, the tension loosened its grip. My breathing evened out. I convinced myself it had been stress, exhaustion, my mind playing tricks in the dark. The face had been similar, not identical. The movement a trick of rain and shadow. Then I saw the next billboard. It stood on the left side of the road this time, its lights brighter, newer. The image was the same older face, but worse. The bruising had spread, one eye swollen, nearly shut. Fresh blood glistened along the hairline, darker against the pale skin. The expression had changed too, less fear now, more desperation. And anger. I didn't stop, couldn't. I drove past, heart hammering, eyes locked forward. Another billboard appeared 5 minutes later, then another. Each one showed a different version of the same future, each more damaged than the last. The backgrounds changed. Sometimes concrete walls, sometimes the interior of a car, sometimes nothing but black. But the face was always mine, always looking at me. My phone vibrated again. You keep choosing the long way. The road ahead split unexpectedly, the signage obscured by grime and age. I slowed, panic rising, unsure which direction led away from the growing constellation of my own suffering. As I hesitated, the final billboard came into view at the fork. This one was unlit. I almost missed it until my headlights caught the surface, illuminating a face so familiar it felt like a punch to the chest. No bruises, no blood, just me, as I was now, staring straight ahead with the same confusion and dawning horror I felt in that moment. Below the image, in stark black letters I didn't remember being there before, was a single line of text. Keep driving. This is where it starts. Behind me, somewhere down the road, I heard the distant crack of metal under strain, like a billboard being replaced. The white lines on the road began forming symbols I couldn't recognize. At first, I thought it was fatigue, the kind that creeps up quietly on long night drives, when the mind starts filling gaps the eyes miss. The highway stretched ahead of me in a single, unbroken ribbon, slick with rain and reflecting my headlights back in pale streaks. The white lane markings slid beneath the car in their usual rhythm. Dash, space, dash, steady enough to lull me into a trance. I blinked hard and tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The rain had thinned to a mist, more like breath than weather, hovering just above the asphalt. Fog pressed in from both sides of the road, swallowing the trees and guardrails until the world narrowed to whatever my headlights could carve out of the dark. The radio had lost its signal miles back, leaving only the low hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on wet pavement. That was when the dashes looked longer. Not by much, just enough to catch my attention. The spacing between them felt off, irregular in a way that made my stomach tighten. I leaned forward slightly, peering through the windshield as another set of markings slid into view. Dash, dash, dash. A curve where there should have been none. I told myself it was perspective. Rain distortion. The fog playing tricks with distance. I'd driven this stretch before, straight, boring, forgettable. Nothing about it should have been remarkable. Yet the next markings were unmistakably wrong. They weren't dashes anymore. They bent inward at sharp angles, intersecting briefly before separating again. The paint looked fresh, brighter than the rest, glowing faintly under my headlights like bone polished smooth. As I passed over them, the shapes seemed to stretch, elongating as if reluctant to disappear beneath the car. prickle ran up my spine. I slowed without meaning to, my foot easing off the accelerator. The engine dropped to a low, uneasy murmur. The fog thickened ahead, swallowing the road in a shifting wall of gray. My headlights cut through it in narrow cones, illuminating only fragments of what lay ahead. More symbols emerged. They repeated with variation, lines branching, looping back on themselves, angles too precise to be accidental. They reminded me of something I couldn't quite place, a half-remembered alphabet from a dream or a diagram seen only once. Each time I tried to focus on a single symbol, my mind slid away from it, as if refusing to settle. I felt watched, though there was nothing beyond the fog but empty road. The sensation wasn't sharp fear, not yet. It was closer to recognition, the uncomfortable awareness of meaning forming just out of reach. Like hearing someone speak in a language you don't know, but sensing they're saying your name. The road curved gently to the left. I didn't remember a curve here. The symbols followed it, flowing with the bend as if painted specifically for this stretch of asphalt. My tires hummed louder now, the sound flattening strangely, as though the road were absorbing it. Even the rain seemed quieter, its soft ticking against the windshield fading into nothing. I rolled down the window a crack. The cold air rushed in, sharp and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth and something metallic beneath it. No wind, no insects, no distant engines. The world felt padded, muffled, as though I were driving inside a sealed room. I rolled the window back up, my breath fogging the glass for a moment before the defroster cleared it. The symbols were closer together now. They no longer stayed neatly between the lanes. Some crossed into the shoulder, others crept toward the center line, overlapping in ways that made my eyes ache. I caught myself tracing them mentally, following their paths, and had to force my gaze back to the road ahead. A sudden jolt of panic hit me when I realized I couldn't remember the last mile marker I'd passed. Had there been one? The highway sign that should have announced the next exit was missing. In its place stood only a dark pole, slick with rain, its reflective surface stripped bare. The fog curled around it like smoke around a burned-out match. My hands were slick with sweat. I wiped one on my jeans, then returned it to the wheel, knuckles pale. The car felt smaller somehow, the cabin pressing in as the outside world dissolved into gray. The symbols grew more complex. Some looked almost deliberate, arranged in sequences that repeated every few yards. Others were incomplete, broken mid-curve as if something had interrupted their formation. A few extended beyond the road entirely, faint traces visible on the asphalt shoulder before vanishing into the fog. I realized, with a slow, sinking dread, that they weren't random. They were directional. Each cluster leaned subtly toward the right, guiding the eye and the car toward a narrowing section of road ahead. The fog there was thicker, darker, swallowing the headlights more aggressively. The white paint pointed toward it insistently, like fingers. "No," I whispered, though no one could hear me. I tried to drift left, away from the symbol's pull. The steering wheel resisted, not sharply, just enough to make the movement feel wrong, as if the road itself were slanted. The tires protested with a soft squeal, then settled back into alignment with the markings. My heart hammered in my chest, loud in the unnatural quiet. The fog parted suddenly, revealing a stretch of road that dipped downward, vanishing into darkness. The symbols crowded together at the edge, layered so thickly that the asphalt beneath was barely visible. They formed a final shape there, larger, more deliberate than the rest. This one I understood, not consciously, not with words, but with a certainty that made my breath hitch. It wasn't a letter or a sign. It was an instruction, an invitation, a destination. The road beyond sloped into a hollow where my headlights couldn't reach. The white paint stopped at its edge, ending abruptly, as though whatever had drawn them refused to go farther. I hovered at the brink, foot trembling over the brake. The engine idled softly, the only sound left in the world. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the symbols behind me began to shift. I saw it in the rearview mirror first, the paint lines rearranging themselves, sliding across the asphalt with a wet, scraping sound I felt more than heard. They reformed into new shapes, closing off the road behind me, erasing the path I'd come from. The mirror fogged over, hiding the movement, but I didn't need to see it to know. The symbols weren't warning me. They were guiding me forward, toward something that had been waiting long enough to learn how to write.